world of sport anyway, that we weren't even allowed to present the facts or the science. And I do believe in inclusion. You know, you heard my speech earlier. Sorry, you've got me twice in a row. But, you know, I really believe in fitness and health and trying to help people. I know that the way to mental health is through physical health. And I will fight for anyone's opportunity to be involved in sport and physical activity and competition if that's what they want. But I just believe that women's rights are worth fighting for. I remember my mum, you know, telling me that her first mortgage, she wasn't allowed to be on the mortgage application, right? And how hard her generation and the previous generation worked to get those rights. And we're just throwing them away at the moment without there being any real basis for it.
Mm-hmm. And Marion, because one of the things that we saw is when the Supreme Court made its ruling at the beginning of the year, there was huge celebrations. There were huge celebrations. People felt like the battle had been won. They were very clear that Sex and the Equality Act meant biological sex, and that was welcomed by people. But I think one of the things that we've seen since then is our institutions have obviously had a bit of a different reaction. So can you tell me a bit about what you've seen?
Well, in short, it seems we have a problem with our institutions, especially our unions, that are refusing to move. They're waiting for clarity. We had clarity. We had it in April. The law is on our side, but for some unknown reason, they just want to kind of circumvent the law. This is also known as breaking the law. So the fight continues on. I mean, like I said, I have my new hobby with suing Scottish Government and other organisations, and they keep wondering who funds us. And I'm going, it's you, Scottish Government, because we keep winning the cases. So, yes, we do have a problem with the institutions, the unions. They are starting to come round. They've realised now that they cannot continue like this. And now, because of the ruling in April, women have actually now they realise they have the power. And they know that they can come to organisations like ourselves who can help them with getting in contact with lawyers, how to actually handle conversations with the unions. So it will happen, it's just not happening fast enough.
And I guess a question for you, because what I've seen in my job in the equality space and the women that I met with is, you take the case of Jennifer Melly. She was a nurse. She had a patient who was a convicted paedophile, that she had a medical conversation with a doctor, and she said he in that conversation because she was talking about medical needs. Now the patient got very upset and had a racist tirade at her. She was a black Christian woman, had a racist tirade at her. And then she was suspended from her job. She's still not been allowed to return to that job. 18 months later, she's been penalised. This question of the racist abuse that she faced has not been addressed. So my worry with the Equality Act generally is it's created this hierarchy of diversity, and the needs of that transgender patient was decided to be much more important than her needs, and she was cast aside, and it was the unions. It was the unions who refused to stand up for her. So this is clearly a problem that we've got, in that people have decided that one side of the equality debate is on the right side of the angels, and the other side doesn't matter. So how do we take on that activism, and how do we get more fairness back into our institutions?
Spot on, Claire. I think we have to understand that women have been beaten over the head with the Be Kind banner way too long. You know, no one is being kind to women. We're just supposed to sacrifice the things that matter to us, and that's not fair. And the other thing is we need people with a backbone to stand up. You know, I can speak from sport, obviously, with great knowledge. We had a lot of DEI officers that sat on boards in sport, and everyone sat there frightened to challenge them. Yeah. And they knew that what they were doing was wrong. They knew it was unfair, and I would have people come up to me every single day in the sporting world and tell me that they were on my side and it was right, but could I get them to speak out? And so we've got to grow a backbone in those boardrooms where people stand up for women's rights, women's equality, and women's opportunities. Can I just jump in there? It's
several years ago, there was an organisation called Stonewall, and they had this campaign called #NoDebate. That is over now. We are actually, we're having a conversation with you, sir, in the front row. But however, do you mean, no, that's not one-sided debate. Women are actually talking now, and we're not going to be put up by one person, one man, actually interrupting. This happened at Scottish Government, outside Parliament. Just 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting outside Parliament with women and men that were speaking. One man with a megaphone and a sound system drowned out hundreds of individuals. I will not allow one man to drown out women that are on this panel now.
And I think the reason that it's important to do this panel and do it in this way is because it's a recognition. It's a recognition that for a long time there was no debate. People were silenced.
Years. Absolutely. I mean, it's for over 5 years. We weren't even allowed to present the facts.
I think this is the difference between Kemi and some of the other leaders that we had, is when people were being silenced, when people were being cancelled, she actually did speak up and she was on their side. And this is why we wanted to give this moment to you guys, and we wanted to do this panel, to your point, is because for too long, nobody would have done this panel. And if people had tried to do this panel, it would have been shut down. So it is important to have this moment.
Kemi was amazing, actually. When I was trying to get a voice, you know, for sportswomen, Kemi was incredible, and she was on the verge of trying to clarify the Equality Act right before the election was called, and she was working incredibly hard behind the scenes, and we were being marginalised by a lot of people that saying it was a fringe matter. It's not a fringe matter because it affects 51% of the population. That is not fringe.
And who did you go and try and speak to? What was it like trying to knock on those doors and not get any sort of public support?
It was just really difficult. I mean, you know, one of the most difficult people to deal with is the IOC. You know, the IOC weren't prepared to support, you know, women when the East German era was going on. That was allowed to go on for 20 years. And it didn't matter to them that women were getting injured and women were getting, you know, were being full of these drugs. I mean, many of those East German girls have lost their lives. Yeah. That's way worse than losing a medal. Yeah. And they did nothing to protect them. So I had absolutely no faith in the IOC, unfortunately. But I think things are beginning to change now. You know, we must find space for everybody. We absolutely must find space for everybody, but be at the detriment of women's opportunities.
And if you just take a step back, so I talked about earlier this hierarchy of diversity where people have decided in the Equality Act that it only protects some people or only protects people in certain ways. The thing that the Equality Act is meant to do is give everyone an equal footing. And obviously the position that we're in now, you can see whether it's this issue, you can see it on race, you can see it in various areas. Lots of people have interpreted it to mean it protects some people, not everybody. So now we've got the ruling in place and we can see that institutions are ignoring it. Do you think we need wider reform of the Act? How do you think we get back to that sense where we are all judged on our character, not on our characteristics?
Gosh, that's a big question, isn't it? I thought it was going to be an easy one. You're absolutely correct in how organisations, large organisations, NHS, or unions, everyone have interpreted this, and women were completely shut out. And the Equality Act was supposed to cover every single person. I mean, that's why we have sex. We all have one, so that everyone is actually covered in it. But I think to go back to it's like kind of the EDI, DEI organisations that we've now got in every single institution or work, and these teams are growing, and they seem to be so narrowly focused on a few of the protected characteristics. One of which barely you never hear about is disability. You know, so but they'll only talk about very narrow focus, and so something has to be done about these teams. I mean, they're actually very destructive to the organisations. They're not helpful. They actually bring in conflict into the workplace rather than actually reducing the workplace. So these needs, it's going to take time to weed this out of all of orgs, but it has to happen.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to be a little bit more general and say that over the last 10, 15, 20 years, we've lost truth. You know, in so many spaces, and I would just love to see truth and facts and science come back. We cannot base policy on feelings. We have to base policy on statistics and facts that work for the majority of people, and we're not doing that at the moment.
And so I think when I first came across this area, I was taken through the Free Speech Act, which is protecting free speech in our universities at the moment. And my worry is that the younger generation are being taught not how to think, but what to think. So how do you tackle that in schools, and how do you get back to that sense of what we want to give to you is critical thinking, not what to think?
Gosh, critical thinking is a tough one, isn't it? Because that's what you seem to have knocked out of our young people. You know, that ability to question and debate. And I think that closing down of debate was a huge problem with that. You know, I mean, we've only got to look at the, you know, what's been going on recently at the Oxford Debate Society and things. You know, these people should be able to debate. If they've got a strong argument, debate respectfully and use facts to back it up rather than closing the argument down. And as you mentioned earlier, you know, Stonewall were in particular misrepresenting the Equality Act to most sporting organisations. And they didn't even have, there was no comeback. So there was no sense of responsibility for the people that are misrepresenting the laws. And that is something that also has to happen. Responsibility. That's gone out the window.
And I wanted to also ask you guys, so we've obviously got an enthusiastic and engaged audience, which is wonderful to see. What are you going to be doing next? Because there's so much to still take on. We've talked a bit about what's happening in our institutions. I know, Sharon, you've got a huge amount of stuff still to do in sport. So what next? How can they follow you guys and watch the fight continue?
Well, we all work with each other. We all try very hard to back each other up because it's been a lonely world and it's been quite a difficult world. So we do try to support each other quite a lot. Just, you know, be more vocal if you can. Don't support silently because that's been the problem. When I did a poll on, and I know it's only X, but when I did a poll on X over 24 hours, 64,000 people responded. That's a lot of people in 24 hours. 97% said women should have fair sport. So the general public do believe in fairness, but unfortunately they're staying a bit too quiet. So just speak up would make a big difference.
I can see various people in this audience who I know have been speaking up, so I'm sure they will heed that call. Marion, what about you? Where will you be next?
Oh my goodness, back in court again, no doubt, shortly. I sometimes wonder if I have to kind of claim asylum in England. Yeah. Will I be allowed back over the border this evening? Nicola Sturgeon might be standing there with her book ready to thump it on my head.
Well, we'd love to keep you if you want.
No, we will just keep campaigning it in Scotland, but with our wider UK colleagues across the whole of the UK. As Sharon stated, there are lots of different groups that are setting up now and have been over the past few years, so we do engage. But again, just what you're saying, it is the public that need to actually start engaging. Just have a conversation with one person every day, whether it's a colleague, a neighbour, a family, taxi driver. There is not a single taxi driver in Edinburgh that's not had their ear nipped by me. You know, and just actually say, did you see this in the news today? Do you mean, what do you think of this? And taxi drivers see it all. So yeah, just have that one conversation. Just be a wee bit braver.
Yeah, and maybe, you know, try not to teach our young girls that they're second class, because I think so many of them are being taught that they're supposed to be passive and everything they do is supposed to come behind somebody else. You know, our girls are just as entitled to opportunities and success as our young men are.
And I think that was I think one of the most damaging things in terms of the debate, when you had women who were raising concerns, whether it was in you know, rape centres, whether it was in prisons, whether it was in changing rooms. So often they were told they were the problem.
Yeah.
And actually their worries were not as important as the worries of someone else.
What happens
and that
is
reinforces
women
something which is in
self-exclude.
society. Yeah.
You know, so rather than cause a fuss, they stop going. They stop going to their swim classes or their yoga classes or, you know, their private sessions. Whatever it is, they stop going into the change rooms or wherever it is. I mean, I had two lovely older ladies that for years have been going to a women's-only swimming class, and one lady caught a bus every morning, and then after she met her friend, did her class, then went for a coffee, put the worlds to right, went home again. And it was a big thing every single week, and it was the only thing she really did. And they had this gentleman that was decided that he was going to change in the changing room, and they tried to change under their towels. They got so uncomfortable, and they just stopped eventually because nobody would support them. And it just little stories like that. Another story was an 11-year-old girl came home from school, said to her mum, today, because there was one young boy that was identifying as a girl, the headmaster decided to run mixed races all day, and not one single little girl had won a race on sports day. And so what message are we giving our little girls? We're telling them they're not worthy, you know, and that's wrong. It's just so wrong.
Yeah. And I think, you know, that's the thing we saw again and again. People were labelled, they were cancelled, they were smeared, they were hounded out of jobs. And that's why I know this party will always stand against it. Because you might have a different opinion, great. But what we will never do is shut down people's opinions. Well, the last question that I want, the last question I want to ask both of you, because I think it is one of the most relevant ones at the moment, is what would you say to the Labour government? Because we have seen some very worrying signs over the last few months of backsliding. So are you speaking to them? What would you say to them? What message do you think they need to hear?
Yeah, we continue to speak to all parties. I am a bit concerned that they're taking their time without actually issuing clear guidance off the back of our April 16th ruling at the Supreme Court. I wish they show a bit more bravery and leadership on this, so that you kind of large organisations, like I said, the NHS or armed forces, all other things that have all captured by these policies, can actually know what they're doing. They just need steering. I mean, that's where the EHRC come in, but it doesn't matter. It came law. It was always the law that females and males deserve their own spaces. So they do need to step up. But I'm glad to see that Kemi has.
Well, if you want to bring your lawsuits down this side of the border, I'm sure they'll be welcome.
But for a penny and for a pound.
I think particularly in sport, just listen to the general public, you know, and listen to the science. You know, there is a place in sport for everybody, but the first priority must be safety. That must come first before absolutely anything else, particularly in contact sports. And then it must be fairness, and then we must work on ways to have inclusion.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, thank you all so much for coming. It is wonderful to see so many of you here. It is wonderful to have both of you on stage. Legends, champions, heroes, thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
I had hoped that during the common stages of this bill, the government would listen to the vast number of respected voices from the education sector who have warned repeatedly that this ill-thought-through bill is nothing short of a disaster for education standards in this country.
We're fighting for Conservative values, fighting for education standards, and fighting against education vandalism by Bridget Phillipson, who puts the interests of unions above the interests of children.
The accumulation of changes through the bill and elsewhere do seem to add up, firstly, to a significant shift towards policy to please unions.
The Secretary of State failed to listen to the Children's Commissioner, who warned that children will spend longer in failing schools because of this bill.
It really saddens me to make this contribution. There are three main aspects of the bill that are of particular concern to me. The proposal to make it compulsory for academies to teach the national curriculum, the harmonisation of teachers' pay across academies and maintained schools, and the pathway for future failing schools.
Or Catherine Burble-Singh, who argued that if passed... Madam Deputy Speaker, this is how they treat one of the best head teachers in this country. There is no evidence whatsoever that their proposals will improve a single school. In fact, the evidence is clear that they will make things worse.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Shadow Secretary of State for Education, Laura Trott.
Conference, hello. It is an absolute honour to be addressing you as Shadow Education Secretary. It's a job I've always dreamed of doing. Well, Education Secretary would obviously be better, but I'm working on it. There are three people on my mind as I speak to you today. Three people who have shaped my thinking, whose stories I want to replicate up and down the country. The first is a girl called Celine, who I heard about from her head teacher. She lived in a dangerous council estate in Sheffield. The closest school to her home just wasn't delivering for children. It was unsafe, with dismal results and terrible behaviour, and it had been that way for years, as was the case with all the schools in the area. That is, until the arrival of the Free Schools programme, a Conservative policy pioneered by the formidable force of Michael Gove and Nick Gibb. Thanks to them, a brilliant head teacher called Dean Webster was able to establish Mercia School. When Mercia opened, Celine got her sliding doors moment, a chance to go to a different, better school. When she started at the new school, the head teacher, Dean, went to visit Celine in her flat. He told me about how, on his way there, he passed gangs on the corner, had to step over people passed out on drugs. It was a glimpse into the world that was waiting for Celine. But through a traditional academic education, a longer school day, and zero tolerance for bad behaviour, Mercia School passed Celine a lifeline. And I couldn't be more pleased to tell you that this summer, Celine got top A-level results and is now going on to study law at university. A brilliant school set her on a very different path. A school which didn't exist 15 years ago and never would have existed without the Conservatives in government. That is the difference that we can make. The second person whose story I would like to share today is a young boy I met in Ilford. I'll call him Mason, but that wasn't his real name. He had a horrendous home life and, for understandable reasons, was acting out terribly at school. He just wasn't coping. He was making life a misery and learning impossible, not just for him, but for the other 29 children in his class too. Enough was enough, and Mason was rightly removed from the mainstream and placed in alternative provision for children with behavioural problems. And that's where I met him. This specialist provision helped change his life. It was his version of intensive care, helping him to get back on his feet with the highly specialised support that he needed and so craved. There are too many that think it is compassionate to keep a child like Mason in mainstream school at the expense not just of his future, but that of his classmates' future too. So let me tell you what real compassion looks like. It's taking Mason out of a setting that was failing him, letting him get the extra support he clearly needed. That is what we need to fight for for children like Mason. And the third person whose story I'd like to share is a teacher called Kat. I met Kat at a recent visit to her school in Trinity, a free school in a deprived area in Leeds where she is the principal. 61% of her pupils were disadvantaged. Over 70% don't have English as their first language. But Kat radiates passion about her school, her teachers and her students, and her energy is infectious. She was rightly so proud of the curriculum they have developed, the high standards of behaviour that they expect from every student, the results that they are seeing every day, which far outstrip anything previously achieved in the local area. Results, I might add, that they can only achieve because of the freedoms that come with being an academy. Freedoms that I refuse to let the Labour government just take away casually without any thought for the consequences. Celine, Mason and Kat. I'm in their service and the thousands like them. They are why I do this job. Unlike Bridget Phillipson, I will never come to work only thinking about the unions. Conference, we know that this party, the Conservative Party, is a true party of opportunity. We know it's not about where you come from, but where you're going. You shouldn't be defined by who your parents are or where you were born, but by your ideas and what you have to contribute. That is why the Conservative Party is a party of opportunity. We, the Conservatives, never succumb to the soft bigotry of low expectations because we believe that every child should have a chance in life. And reforming schools unleashes opportunity, plain and simple. But it's not enough just to believe in public service reform. The inconvenient reality, and other parties might want to take note, is that you actually have to have a plan to deliver it to. And that is exactly what the Conservatives in government did. An Academies Act passed in 77 days. Hundreds of new free schools, thousands of new academies, a rigorous curriculum, high-quality technical education, tougher exams, better teaching standards, phonics, a stop to grade inflation, calculators and exams thrown out, millions more children in good and outstanding schools. That is what the Conservatives did in government. We reformed schools. And guess what? Standards, they went through the roof. Those schools have improved, not through words, but through strong accountability, academic rigour, rigorous inspection, and freedoms. And crucially, all of that happens with teachers and not bureaucrats in control. Conference, under us, English children became the best at reading and maths in the Western world. This is an achievement that other countries marvel at. They look to us as an example of what they want to replicate in their schools, eager to learn how this was achieved. But, unbelievably, all of these reforms are under threat. Under threat from a Labour Party who believe in backing unions over backing children. A Labour Party that even booed one of Britain's best head teachers in the House of Commons simply because she runs a school which was opened by a Conservative government. The only consistent strand of this Labour government is that union demands come ahead of the interests of children of this country. It should be of no surprise to anyone that Bridget Phillipson is running for Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. As Education Secretary, she spent more time appeasing unions than standing up for children. From the outset, her loyalties were very clear. In the first few months, she held dozens of meetings with union leaders, allowing them to write her policies. And what was the result? A schools bill that nobody voted for, botched Ofsted reforms, a dumbing down of standards, and a misguided curriculum review. Every single time, the Education Secretary has been confronted with a tough decision. She's capitulated to the left. This might help her with the deputy leadership election, but it doesn't help children at school. In all the chaos that is going on in the world, we have to just stop and realise the extent of damage that Labour are doing to school children. And that starts with unpicking our school reforms. There is no evidence that Labour's so-called reforms will improve a single school, not any. The sad fact is, we already have a live case study of why Labour's changes won't work. And it's a little over 40 miles away from this hall. Over the border, children in Labour-run Wales are being let down. They're untouched by the education revolution seen here in England. Unfortunately, Wales have seen plummeting standards and poorer outcomes. Just look at this graph. Instead of learning what not to do from Wales, the Education Secretary is inexplicably repeating the very same policies, the very same mistakes. And why? Because union bosses want her to, trading policy for votes, and all to the detriment of children's education. Shame on the Labour Party. Shame on them for letting that waste of potential happen here. Labour are turning their backs on everything that we know improves schools, everything that people in this hall have worked so hard for, everything that Celine, Mason and Kat need. This is a quiet betrayal of all children, but it's the poorest who will be most affected. This is nothing less than education vandalism, and Conference, together with my brilliant shadow education team, Diana, Saqib, Rebecca and Jack, we will fight it every step of the way. Let me turn now to one of the key problems facing schools, behaviour. We must make sure that every child who goes to school is given the chance to learn from excellent head teachers and without fear for their safety. I went to a good comprehensive with some brilliant teachers to whom I'm extremely grateful. But I also saw the consequences of bad behaviour. I can tell you, being at a school where teachers are sometimes locked in cupboards, things are thrown in the classroom, and fights break out in the hallway does not make it easy to learn, or for teachers to teach. The truth is that children cannot learn if they're stuck in a chaotic environment where bad behaviour runs rife. You would think that this is obvious, but not, it seems, unfortunately, to the Labour Party. Sadiq Khan thinks that when you bring a knife into the classroom, you shouldn't be expelled. Andy Burnham, who's been a popular topic of conversation recently, called for the end to pupil referral units. So no more expulsions for the most disruptive pupils. That's mad. And north of the border in Scotland, the SNP have actively sought to keep disruptive pupils in mainstream schools, to the point where last year, just a single pupil was permanently excluded over the whole academic year, across the whole of Scotland. Conference turning a blind eye to aggression, disruption or violence is not moral leadership, it's an abdication of responsibility. Pursuing inclusion at the expense of order is the opposite of compassion. It abandons that child who needs real specialist help, who's crying out for support. So, instead of this left-wing nonsense, we have a blueprint to improve discipline, building on the work of the last Conservative government. It starts with being honest about the need for permanent exclusions. We can't shy away from setting clear boundaries for excluding pupils when they've been extremely violent or are carrying a knife. This is not about giving up on those children. It's actually the opposite. Children must learn that actions have consequences. That's just how the world works. So, under the Conservatives, our policy is simple. One knife and you are out. If you assault a teacher, then you are out. If you sexually assault someone, then you are out. If you've been expelled from not just one, but 2 mainstream schools, then it's clear that mainstream classrooms just aren't for you. If children bring knives into the classroom, they shouldn't be there. If they are violent, then they shouldn't be there. And under the Conservatives, they won't be there. But the important piece of the jigsaw here is that once children have been excluded, it is our duty to them and their future to give them the support that they need, moving them into specialist alternative provision where they stand a real chance of success. Staff in these settings work with extraordinary dedication to turn around the lives of children. I've seen this firsthand. When done well, it's a quality of education that can be tailored to their needs. I saw that with Mason. But we need more places like this. It's clear to me that there is not enough high-quality alternative provision, and as a result, disruptive pupils are being kept in mainstream education for far too long. Our blueprint will create more high-quality places in alternative provision, reducing disruption for the many who suffer from it, and delivering specialist support for the few who need it. And every local area should have specialist provision, partnering with football teams and sports clubs who are brilliant at engaging young people. Just yesterday, I visited Old Trafford and saw the amazing work that Manchester United Foundation are doing to do just that, providing young people with role models, mentors, routine and discipline. This should be everywhere. And girls should have separate provision from violent young men. And we should push standards up through every academy train, partnering with one. We should make alternative provision independent of local authorities. We should make sure that every provider is registered so that every setting is inspected by Ofsted, so there is proper accountability and rigour, especially in those settings for some of the most disadvantaged and challenged children. And we must ensure that those children, especially the most violent, are turning up to their alternative provision, so they're not slipping out of sight and into criminality. Because we believe that children should be in the classroom, not on the street. Fines should be issued automatically when they are not there, because these children need help, and we need to ensure that they get it, and they only get it if they turn up. If we do all this, we can show compassion for those who need it the most, not by some false inclusivity that damages everyone, but by challenging and actually fixing the behavioural issues. Now let me come on to another problem that is causing behavioural issues: smartphones. Time after time, teachers have told me that smartphones are one of the biggest causes of bad behaviour. The government's own research show that they disrupt nearly half of GCSE classes every single day. Look abroad. In Portugal, schools that banned smartphones saw a huge drop in bullying. Australia, Norway, Finland, France, all tightening restrictions on smartphones. Meanwhile, Labour just ignore our call for action. The single biggest thing Labour could do right now to improve behaviour is to get smartphones out of the classroom. And yet the Prime Minister says a ban is unnecessary. Bridget Phillipson calls it a gimmick. And while they stick their heads in the sand, who suffers the most? It's the most disadvantaged. When I first started going into schools to talk to students about this, I didn't necessarily expect to be the most popular person. Taking away smartphones from teenagers is not something that you think would go down particularly well. Yet I have been overwhelmed by the response. The most frequent reaction from students after a ban has been put in place is one of pure relief. I will never forget the face of one boy who told me that it made him feel safe. Young people don't want this to be an issue that they are having to deal with. They want the adults to sort it out. So I'm speaking directly to Bridget Phillipson now. For goodness sake, just get on and do it. Now, the sad truth is this. We've had broken promise after broken promise from the Department for Education. You simply cannot trust Bridget Phillipson when she says that she's going to improve our schools. Conference, you all know about Labour's plans to become the only country in Europe to tax education. It was one of their core manifesto pledges and one of their most vindictive. Because the result of the attack on the independent sector is not more teachers in state schools, but fewer. 400 fewer, to be precise. And we haven't got a better state school system from Labour's education tax. We've just got one with more crowding in the classrooms. Because independent schools are closing at a record rate. Pressure is being piled on the state sector in a way that teachers across the system warned about. The Prime Minister himself admitted money isn't going to state schools. Conference, and I promise you I'm not making this up, instead of using money to hire more teachers, as the manifesto said, the Prime Minister is using the money to house illegal migrants. Under the Conservatives, we will never tax education to make our state schools worse off. Conference, as I have laid out for you today, by blindly following trade union orthodoxy, Labour are taking us backwards. It took real courage and conviction for us to get those school reforms through 15 years ago. Headlines of the local papers at the time read, "Hands off our failing schools." Unions were allergic to the change, competition and accountability. Decades on, and now Labour's stated ambition in their so-called reforms is to create more consistency in the education system, not excellence. In practice, that means levelling down across the board. In recent decades, parents and children have voted with their feet. Bad schools closed, good schools thrived. That is the strength of choice. Those are Conservative principles in action. But Labour's schools bill rips that apart, handing local authorities sweeping new powers, not only to block good schools from growing, but even to stop an outstanding school from keeping the same number of pupils. This is madness. It risks shattering life chances for some of our most deprived children. We know that turning failing schools into academies is the single most effective way of helping children. Yet Labour will keep children trapped in failing schools for longer, denying them the opportunity that they deserve. This will be Labour's record. This will be Bridget Phillipson's legacy, and that is why we must fight them all the way. Fight the education vandalism of Phillipson, who puts the interests of unions above British interests, above the interests of Celine, Mason and Kat. Teachers deserve better, the next generation deserves better, our country deserves better. It is the Conservatives who've reformed education for the better before, and we will do so again. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the mayoral candidate for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight and serving Police and Crime Commissioner, Donna Jones.
Good morning, conference. I've had the privilege of being elected under the banner of the most successful political party in the world, the Conservative Party, not once, but 5 times. In 2008, I was elected to Portsmouth City Council following a successful career in banking. And just 6 years later, in my mid-30s, I was the first woman to become the leader of the City Council. But more importantly, I was the first Conservative leader for 25 years. Since 2021, I have been the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. But in 7 months' time, I'm going to face the ballot box once more. This time, to be the first mayor for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. One person with the power to unite our 2 counties, bringing real leadership and finally getting things done. We are a dynamic region, from the success of one of the largest ports in Europe to being home to the largest oil refinery in Great Britain. Forget the northern powerhouse, we're going to be the southern powerhouse. And yet we do need a single voice to speak for us, to champion investment and to fight our corner into government. So I'll be an outward-looking mayor, one that backs business, rewards work, protects what we love and gives people a genuine say in how their communities are run. But prosperity means little if people can't get around easily. So I'll end the war on motorists, fixing our roads and making travel quicker. I'll introduce free parking in our town centres to help our high streets and small businesses. And I'm going to fine contractors for every day that roadworks overrun. And when it comes to the ferries for the Isle of Wight, I'll demand the government hands over the regulatory powers to ensure accountability over prices and performance. Conference, my message to the electorate next year is simple. Put your faith in leadership that you can trust. As Police and Crime Commissioner, I've listened and I've acted to what people have told me they wanted. In 2024, I brought back local bobbies, a named police officer for every community. A policy that was so successful, a year later, the Labour government copied it. Over the last 2 years, I have delivered on another promise, to open new police stations. Not 1, but 8 in total, and I've outlined plans to open another 2 next year. I've opened up front counters to give the public access to their police force again. But most importantly, my current role has meant I've worked closely alongside our Shadow Lord Chancellor. And that brings me to the person that I have the honour of introducing today, our Shadow Justice Secretary. He is a man who is not afraid to speak truth to power, someone who has exposed Labour's reckless plans for 2-tier justice, a system that would have meant the same crime could be punished differently depending on your background. That is wrong. And it is the Conservative, the true party of fairness and equality, who are standing up against it. Our Shadow Justice Secretary has shown leadership and principle, calling out Labour's soft approach on crime. He's challenged Transport for London over their failure to act decisively over train dodgers and fighting back against proposals that would have allowed prisoners to walk free without serving their time. He understands that justice must be fair, firm, but importantly, it must be impartial. He understands that the safety and confidence of our communities depend on it. So, conference, it is my great pleasure to introduce someone who has never wavered in his defence of the rule of law, a champion for fairness, my friend and our Shadow Lord Chancellor, Robert Jenrick, MP.
Thank you. Well, hello, conference. And it is great to see you all today. Isn't Donna brilliant? Look, conference, we are going to get Donna elected as the first mayor of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Forget the King of the North. We're going to have a Queen of the South. And it's going to be Donna Jones. Now, I want to talk to you today about 4 famous blondes. 4 famous blondes who tell the story of the predicament that our party is in today and how we're going to get out of it. Because right now, it's true. It's tough being a Tory. 6 months ago, the Tory legend, Sir Michael Fabricant, went on the Big Brother house. He lasted 4 days. Last week, one of our party's most energetic campaigners, Emily Hewitson, entered the Big Brother house. She lasted 11 hours. She didn't even get to spend the night. And now, conference, I've heard that a 3rd Tory blonde is in negotiations to enter the Big Brother house. Liz Truss. But the negotiations have broken down, conference. She's asking to be paid by the minute. Too soon, perhaps. Too soon. Look, I'll come back to the blondes in a moment. But, conference, it's not all doom and gloom right now. Last month, I received some good news, courtesy, surprisingly, of Angela Rayner. Keir Starmer's emergency reshuffle, otherwise known as, remember, Phase 2. Anyone remember that? Well, I think Keir Starmer would like to forget it as well. Anyway, it led to a great privilege for me. I now shadow a new Justice Secretary, David Lammy. Now, David Lammy has a somewhat checkered past. You might recall his appearance on the BBC's Celebrity Mastermind. David Lammy, Celebrity Mastermind. You do not need to be a lawyer to know that that is a violation of the Trade Descriptions Act. He was asked, which famous blue cheese is paired with port? He replied, Red Leicester. It gets worse. It gets worse. Which Marie won the Nobel Prize for Physics? He replied instantly, Marie Antoinette. And my personal favorite, which monarch succeeded Henry VIII? His answer, Henry VII. I'm not sure Mastermind was the show for David. Perhaps you could try Pointless. He would work as both a contestant and an answer. But look, in all seriousness, it is great to be here in Manchester, in the proud, historic city of Manchester. A city that has given our country so much, but which has also suffered great tragedy. Most recently last week, when Heaton Park Synagogue was attacked. It was an attack on all of us. Thoughts and prayers, yes, absolutely. But I don't know about you, but I'm fed up with platitudes. We've had enough of those, haven't we? I believe in justice and action. Whilst other parties have waxed and waned, I am so proud that our party, the Conservative Party, has always stood with our Jewish community. And under Kemi's leadership, I know we always will. Because conference, a Britain where our British Jewish friends are afraid is not Britain. And we will never stand for it. Now, next year is the 30th anniversary of another devastating attack on Manchester. The IRA unleashed the biggest bomb to explode in England since the Second World War. In more recent times, long after the Troubles ended, IRA members used so-called human rights laws to sue the British government for compensation, while dragging our soldiers through the courts. To stop this injustice, the last Conservative government passed the Legacy Act. We took the side of our brave servicemen, the side of the victims, and above all, the side of the decent people of Britain. We refused to give in. That is something everyone in this room should be truly proud of. Now, I had a moral reason to back that bill, but I also had a personal one. Like most Saturdays, my nan and granddad, Ivy and Sid, were here. They're in Manchester city centre when the bomb went off. And we heard about it back home on the radio, and we had an anxious couple of hours whilst we waited until finally we heard that my grandparents had arrived home safely and weren't hurt. Fast forward to today, and elderly veterans who risked their lives to protect us from terrorists like those who bombed this city face spending their dying days being dragged through the courts. Why? Because Labour wants to repeal our Legacy Act. It is shameful. Let that sink in. The last generation's heroes betrayed by this generation's sellouts. It's not right. It's not justice. And conference, never on our watch. Now, we all knew that Keir Starmer would be a bad Prime Minister. But I don't think anyone anticipated he would be this bad. He's combined the management style of David Brent with the administrative grip of Blackadder's Baldrick. He's proven himself to be a freebie grabbing, free speech stifling, criminal releasing, tax raising, farmer hating, Brexit betraying, aspiration sapping, sorry excuse for a leader. And conference, this is someone who makes a hole in the air look substantial. Peter Mandelson appear trustworthy, and Mr. Bean look like a model of competence and grip. But despite all this, and this might surprise you, I think we've got reason to be optimistic. And that's because, in ways that matter most profoundly, the fantasists, masquerading as experts, are seeing their myths busted. The people got it right, while they got it wrong. Wrong on mass migration, wrong on free speech, wrong on net zero, wrong on two-tier justice. Make no mistake, the old order, it's collapsing. For too long, the chattering classes drowned out the voice of the people. Our job, conference, is to make sure that the people's will prevails. But it won't be easy. It won't be easy. Because right now, the gap between the government and the governed is wider than ever before. Ladies and gentlemen, let me give you one example of that great gulf. I present to you the Attorney General, Richard Hermer. Like one of those infamous mafia lawyers of yesteryear, Hermer always chose a particular type of client. Shamima Begum, Osama bin Laden's right-hand man, terrorists involved in 7/7. Since taking office, the advice we're told Lord Hermer has given to Starmer and his cronies, like to give away the Chagos Islands to an ally of China and to pay billions of pounds for the privilege. In each and every one of these incidents, he's wasted no time establishing himself as a useful idiot for our enemies. His rise symbolizes the central truth of Keir Starmer's government. Labour is just not on Britain's side. Why on earth? Why on earth? Thank you. Why on earth would Britain's Attorney General change the law to enable our country's enemies to sue the very government that he represents? Well, it makes more sense when you realise that another of Lord Hermer's old clients was, you guessed it, Gerry Adams. Gerry Adams. Not long ago, a man with his past would have had no place in mainstream politics. Now he sits around the cabinet table and he influences the biggest decisions about our country. The same cabinet table that the IRA tried to blow up in 1991. Shame on him, and shame on the man who appointed him. Now, last week at Labour conference, Labour lined up to attack me for scrutinising judges, for mind-boggling. Labour just don't get it. They don't get it. They really don't. Now, you might be wondering, what have I got in this box? Well, don't worry. I'm not about to do a Michael Fabricant tribute act. This is actually serious. For those of you at the back of the room who can't see, I have here a judge's wig. It's something we should all respect and revere. When a judge dons a wig, it signifies the transition from their everyday personality, their identity, to that of a legal arbiter. It's a visual representation of the judge's role as an unbiased mediator, focused solely, only, on upholding the law and delivering justice. An unbiased mediator. That is what a judge should be. And that is what the vast majority of judges in our legal system do. They wear the wig. They respect and revere it. And that is why, in turn, our legal system is respected and revered all around the world. But we've got a problem. Conference, we have a problem. It's one that Labour choose to ignore. Today, I've uncovered dozens of judges with links to Open Borders charities who take to social media to broadcast their Open Borders views, who spent their whole careers fighting to keep illegal migrants in this country. Some even continue to do so whilst astonishingly serving as judges. It's like finding out halfway through a football match that the ref is actually a season ticket holder for the other side. The public rightly ask, how independent are they? They dishonour generations of independent jurists who came before them, and they undermine the people's trust in the law itself. Judges who blur the line between adjudication and activism can have no place in our justice system. Which is why we won't just tinker with a broken system and reform immigration tribunals. We will abolish them, once and for all. And we won't stop there. We will restore the proper role of our judiciary, putting ultimate power back where it belongs, in the hands of Parliament and ministers, accountable to you, the people of our country. So I can announce today that we will restore the office of the Lord Chancellor to its former glory. We will reverse the constitutional vandalism of Tony Blair and New Labour. The Lord Chancellor will once again appoint the judges. No more quangos. And they will be instructed never to permit political activists of any political hue to don the wig ever again. They will also be responsible for issuing new sentencing guidelines. The two-tier sentencing council is not fit for purpose, so it must be abolished altogether. Never again will this country and our people face the prospect of two-tier justice under two-tier care. Every single person treated exactly the same. Not equity, equality. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the Conservative, no, that is the British way to do justice. Now, I know you are all wondering, who's the fourth blonde that I mentioned at the beginning? The one who will point the way to how we recover the fortunes of our party. Is it Margaret Thatcher? Not this time. Is it Boris Johnson? No. Lord Heseltine. Bear with me. As you can imagine, Michael Heseltine and I do not agree on everything. But he told me that when he was a young man in opposition back in the 1970s under Margaret Thatcher, he would wake up every morning and he'd ask his wife, how am I going to fight Labour today? And at the end of the day, he would lie in bed again and he would ask his wife, Well, he obviously wasn't a very romantic man. Tomorrow, how am I going to fight Labour? Now, I don't say that to my wife in bed. But I do think it. And that is what each and every one of us must do. Fight this failing Labour government. Fight for the future of our country. And when we fight, we win. Like forcing Sadiq Khan to go after those fare dodgers who blight the capital, stopping two-tier sentencing rules and guidelines, and ensuring there is equality before the law for everyone. And most importantly, led by Kemi, shaming the Labour government to ensure there is a full national inquiry into the rape gang scandal. Don't let anyone tell you that opposition is pointless. It matters. And right now, with this government, it matters more than ever. And conference, your support matters too. To the door knockers, the pavement pounders, the envelope stuffers, the tweeters, the TikTokers, the members, the councillors across the length and breadth of this country. Let me say to you, each day, in all kinds of ways, you are getting things done, far away from the wood-panelled corridors of Westminster. I say thank you. Thank you for everything that you are doing. You are making our country a better place. And please, though it may feel tough, don't ever forget what you are doing for all of us right now. Thank you. Now we all know that feeling when you've eaten too much and you simply think, enough. As those of you who've known me for a while will know, I used to feel that a lot more than I do today. But speaking to people out in the country, I think the British people are using that same word, enough. Enough of being overlooked. Enough of being treated like fools. They see it, don't they? When they watch freeloaders brazenly walk out of shops laden with goods they haven't paid for. They hear it when morons blast music in public places with utter disregard for others. And they feel it when they see the police ignore all these things, yet find time to knock on someone's door and scold them for a post on social media. Dismissed, derided, demeaned for so long. The British people are patient and they are tolerant, but only up to a point. They've had enough. Now, I've read countless stories about how talented young people are abandoning the UK. They're emigrating to Dubai or Singapore or Australia, and not just because of the weather. Conference, this is my message to you. We may be a little bit down, but our country is not out, because there is a better way. There is so much good in our country that's worth fighting for. We've got so much to cherish about who we are. Blue remembered hills seen from black country towns, big skies over the flat acres of Nottinghamshire, the best farmers, food and drink, beer in the world, from Aberdeen Angus steaks to Hawkstone lager, a love of pubs, our love of animals, the common law, jury trials, a royal family so admired that they make the most powerful man in the world go weak at the knees. A military that has defeated every force on the planet. The roar of the crowd at Twickenham as the Red Roses beat the Canadians. Or Chris Wokes, arm in a sling, goes out to bat at the Oval. The quiet kindness of our hospice movement. The millions of volunteers whose helping hands and broad shoulders make our society strong. The spirit of builders, of makers, of doers, of givers. These are the reasons our hearts swell when we think of Britain. I see it, conference, and so do you. I see it when I travel around our country, even making the occasional video. I've developed a Michael Portillo-esque knowledge of Britain's motorway service stations. So if you're watching, hello to my friends at Greg's, at Peterborough North Services. You might see me later this week. But above all, as I've been visiting communities, I've asked a lot of questions. And I'm telling you, out there, the spirit is strong. I felt it when I went to Epping and stood with mums, local mums, sick of illegal migration and determined to keep their families safe. I felt it when I went out with tradesmen, gas fitters like my dad, sick of their livelihoods being wrecked when scumbags break into their vans and nick their tools and sell them in plain sight at the local car boot sale. I felt it when I talked to folk putting up flags, sick of their identity being sneered at. The collapse of the old order is in sight. A new one is coming because the British people are fighting back. And conference, there's absolutely nothing that Labour can do to stop them. The only choice we have is whether we have the spirit to fight with them. Are we going to quit when the going gets tough? No. Are we going to dig deep and fight like never before? Yes. How long will our battle last? As long as it takes. Because Britain, for all its present flaws, is too precious to lose. Let me not see our country's honour fade. Let us see our land retain her soul, her pride, her freedom. Conference, every tide turns. I can feel Britain's fortunes turning. So let's pick ourselves up. Let's dust ourselves down. Let's draw on Britain's greatness to make it greater still. Let's fight for a better future. Let's build this new order. Let's take our country back. Thank you, conference. Thank you.
the debate out, and we couldn't. In the early days, we literally could not even get the debate. We couldn't get the science and the facts. We weren't even allowed to tell the truth. It's still difficult today, but it's a lot better than it was, and we are gradually, you know, winning the battle in sport. But then we have, you know, Lisa Nandy last week turn around and say, oh, well, some sports. Well, any sport that could have been co-ed was already co-ed. So any sport that was fair to have men and women in together already had it, and that was predominantly equestrian. So there is no level playing field if you allow any biological male into a women's sport whatsoever. And what we've found... And what we found very dishearteningly as well, you know, it's been allowed to happen for a long time, but in sports like cycling and darts, billiard, pool, where there's money to be had, that's where we've seen the most. So those women, a tiny percentage of the money that's involved in those sports weren't even allowed to have that. And, you know, and it's just not fair, you know. So inclusion must be there. And I heard this gentleman down here, and please, you're very welcome to stand up, all right? I have no problem with inclusion. However, no trans athlete has ever been excluded from sport. They've just been asked to compete where it's fair. That is it. But we cannot remove the biological advantage. There's not a single piece of peer-reviewed science in the world that says that we can remove the biological advantage. So why do you think women aren't entitled to fair sport? Could you just tell me, though, why do you think women aren't entitled to fair sport? Okay. But then we can't have fair sport if we have males, people that are biologically male in their sport. So you're taking away fair sport for women. And I will never, ever let that happen.
So can I ask,